Should we get this started?
Yep.
And just have a little final listen. Hello, check. Check, check, check. Cool. Yeah, that'll do. Right. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to There's a VIP in the Shed. It's been a long time, it feels like. It's been a couple of months, I would say, since I last recorded a podcast. So good to be back here, and sorry to keep you waiting, basically. It's been a bit of a crazy summer. But I am back. I'm joined by a chap I'm quite excited to have a chat with. He's doing some really cool award-winning charity work, actually, combating Russian anti-Ukraine propaganda, which is a pretty intriguing topic in its own right, if you're a local or not. So, welcome to the shed, Rhodri Curnow. Is that how you pronounce your surname? Curnow?
Yeah, that's actually pretty accurate. Yeah.
Good stuff. Okay, cool. Well, welcome, as I say. So yeah, let's get into it. Or yeah, there's I don't know if you ever played the Grand Theft Auto 3, but there was on their fake radio station, there was a guy, Chico Chavez, I think his name was, and he had a talk show, and he always said, "Let's press the issue." So that's what I always think of when I start the podcast.
The GTA fake radios are great.
Exactly, I do love them, and you know, I just drive around in cars for ages, just listening to the fake radio as a 16-year-old, 17-year-old. It's a bit of crack. And my old man used to tell me, you should be practicing for your actual driving tests. And I said, well, I am. And I'd do a reverse park in a stolen car. And then he'd be like, all right, fine. But anyway, right, sorry, listeners. Tangent already. So yeah, how does one get involved with combating Russian anti-Ukraine propaganda? That's not something you sort of wake up and think you're going to do.
No, it's not. Going back to gaming, when I was just left uni and I was playing the Star Wars online game, and I was running, obviously I progressed and whatever else and got good at the game. Well, I say good, and I ended up running a raid team because it was a European server. Basically, nobody really spoke each other's languages, but everybody at least had passable English. Mm-hmm. And one of the people I played with was a Ukrainian, and this was pre the Crimean invasion, pre the Revolution of Dignity. So this was 2012, 2013. And then she mentioned one day that she was going to be away. And it was fair enough, people have lives. And I hadn't put the two and two together because not just the BBC, but I'm not going to slag off it, just think the news in general were not very good at covering the 2013, 2014 protests. Mm-hmm. In fact, to say appalling is probably a fairly apt descriptor. And it turned out she'd gone off to Kyiv as part of these demonstrations.
Right.
And then she came back and we were chatting away, and then obviously the invasion of Crimea happened. And then one thing after another, I just dropped out of the game. And then in 2022, there was obviously the current invasion by Russia. And I got involved, I messaged her to make sure she was fine. She'd gotten out, but one of her friends had been killed. And at the time I was busy with other things, but I was vaguely terminally online with Twitter, and so I was following what was happening, and you'd post messages, and then I would see people who were posting things that were just simply not true because I'd been speaking to Ukrainians,
right,
or at least one specific Ukrainian, and I was trying to find out through that, and then I did my summer stuff. I did some bike rides. I did my own thing over the summer. I wasn't really following it that closely, but then come the sort of autumn, I'd moved into where I'm living now because I had to move out. And then this weird hashtag, NAFO, NAFO, and it's a group of, and I'm not quite sure how to describe it without sounding completely insane, because it's something you've got to be in there to understand. And it's basically a big group, a big decentralized group of people who push back against. It's mostly Russian propaganda against Ukraine, but it's also stuff against the West as well. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of how I got into that. Was I was like, okay, so these are like-minded individuals, and you can sort of, if you want to join, you donate to certain charities. There's things like the Georgian Legion, who are sort of Georgian expats who are fighting against Russia because of what happened in the South Odessa in 2008 with that invasion. and then there's United 24, which is like the official English language Ukrainian charity, and then that's sort of how I got into it, and then it sort of became an ever increasing part of my life, or my personal life.
Okay, so what's your involvement with them then?
So a lot of time it's I would like to say, as I said, countering Russian disinformation. It's mostly arguing with people on Twitter. It's not
Right.
it's not quite that bad. I'm simplifying for a slight joke.
Yeah.
So part of it is that it's countering the propaganda directly on Twitter. It's starting to do things like this now. So obviously it's the first time I've been on a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I think there are other podcasts out there. So there's things like the Silicon Curtain with Jonathan Fink, who I had a bit of a fanboy moment when I met him in February, because so we've been joining in the protests. So there's the big one in London, obviously, for the 24th of February. I'd already promised to go to that one because I know there was one in Cardiff.
Mm-hmm.
I'd already committed because I said I was going to go down there. So there's the countering information. We're starting to do more real space stuff. I know in last summer 2023 there was they called it the NAFO summit, which was in the week before the NATO summit in Vilnius, because NAFO was very consciously modelled on the NATO model. So there's starting to be more and more like real world things which people are doing. A great Finnish researcher into again, he got his start mostly looking at Russian, but it's now sort of a general thing for him, is now dealing with disinformation in general. And I can't say his second name, but there's a guy called Pekka. If you look up Vatnik Soup, he's got a book out now on the issue. That book is specifically about Russian propaganda, but a lot of the techniques are starting to be used elsewhere.
Right. Okay. Like what?
So okay, so China's starting to take notice of this as well. So they're doing
In
it
a
with
good
Taiwan
way, or
in a bad way. So they're talking about how Taiwan is it's this colony of, it's the same rhetoric. Taiwan's a colony of China. It's ethnically Chinese, therefore we should be allowed to control them.
Mm-hmm.
And as somebody with my accent, I'm like, hang on a second, I'm Welsh, but you're trying, by that argument, I'd be English. I'm like, no. So that's part of it as well for me as well. It's the blood and soil nationalism is also why I kind of oppose it a little bit, because the blood and soil nationalism, like if you are partly something or you speak that language, you are controlled by the country who is predominantly that language.
What's the Russian response been to what you're doing?
Quite entertaining, but that's because of my sense of humor. We have definitely annoyed the Kremlin.
Okay.
To the point where, like, a proper Russian propagandists, so like the official spokespeople for the Kremlin, have actually come out and denounced us directly.
Yeah.
Which is entertaining to us.
Does that concern you?
Yes and no. I think I'm way small. I don't think Putin's going to waste his Skripal poisoning on me. But
you never know.
You never know. I might have annoyed him with one of my latest memes or something.
Careful touching door handles that you don't recognise.
I think the good thing with the online side of it is that because it's so disparate, so separated out, it's it would be very difficult to deal with NAFO. Elon Musk has been trying to deal with us, like suppressing. Slight conspiracy theory, but they've been like, it's very noticeable if you post about Ukraine versus not post about Ukraine, the impact you get on your tweets.
I thought he was all about free speech.
Well, yeah, he says that, but what people claim and what people are. I mean, it goes back to my theory. Is a theory I have about, if you want to pass a horrible law, you'd call it the Puppies and Kittens Act, right? Because you would say, otherwise you're opposing the puppies and kittens. So he was at least initially very free speech. Unfortunately, I don't think he quite realised that doesn't necessarily mean you have to platform some of the people that are now on Twitter. And he has become very anti-Ukraine over the last 2 years.
Right,
that's very noticeable.
Why would he do? What was his motivation for that? Do you think?
I have no idea. I mean, he's very, very rich. He's running all these companies that require all these rare earth minerals. The best places to get those rare earth minerals are Ukraine, Russia, and probably China. So that's part of the reason why I would assume that there's going to be that. And also, if you're very rich and very famous, having somebody who's very powerful saying, "Oh, you're so amazing," you get an ego when you're that kind of person.
Yeah, that's it's an interesting take on things. It's kind of counter the rhetoric that you hear. You know, Elon Musk is very much sort of branded as a free speech savior, isn't he? Or perhaps that's the branding he's trying to cultivate for himself. So yeah, that's as I say, it's the first time I've heard that. I'm not sort of saying that as if I'm some Musk sort of pro guy or whatever. But that's interesting.
Yeah, it's a hard sell. I realize that because of the brand that he put there. But the more I've seen of him, I mean, I had to block him because he was driving me up the wall with some of the stuff he was saying. Again, like, it goes back to what I was saying. He's posting stuff that is verifiably not just not correct, but not even wrong. Like, it's stuff that's so wrong that you actually have to point out what the wrong statement should have been.
Doesn't even bear thinking about.
Yes.
Yeah. Right. Interesting. Okay. Yeah. I don't quite know what to say about that. This is what you're saying about tangents, right?
Yeah,
it's cool. So
what you're saying about tangents is you want to try and explain this stuff without sounding like a crazy person. So, like, I'm moderating a lot of it here because I could go on to about crazy conspiracy theories about ketamine, but I don't think that's completely true. But I think when you get to be a certain level of rich and powerful, you're definitely very isolated from reality. And I'm not having to go at Musk here. It's just that that's, I think, true of everybody who's in that kind of position of power and fame. Because people don't want to, the people around Musk are going to, a lot of time, are going to be people he employs. So they're not going to tell him no. Because he's one of the things he's very famous for is just firing people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So...
Yeah, that is something that's quite well known for sure. So the work that you guys, I mean, how many people are in this NAFO?
That's actually really hard to pin down because it's all based on it's based on the donations and the rest of it. I think there was last I looked, and this was a while ago, there was roughly they reckon about 150,000 people worldwide. So that's not obviously that's a lot of people. Obviously, it's not much when you think of the population of the planet. It's 7 billion, but it's quite a concerted effort, and it's pretty global. So I mean, there's obviously, because of how the algorithm works, I only really see the English language side of Twitter. I see quite a bit of Ukrainian and Russian now, obviously, from sort of being in that side of things. But there's a lot. I mean, and again, like with the recommendations, you're going to see a lot of the people you interact with. But I do see new accounts so often, and one of the things we do, and it's partly to very slightly, like, not game the algorithm, but like to get people so they can get a platform, is we do make a concerted effort to find the people who are working with us to actually tweet out. But what's very interesting is that it's not just the number of people who are involved; it's who's involved. So Kaja Kallas, I mispronounced that horribly, the head of state of Estonia, she's been given an honorary position.
Right.
So certain people have been given honorary positions. They're sort of people who have done really good stuff. So there's a Ukrainian fencer whose name escapes me right now. She was given one after she beat a Russian in saber, I believe, and then so this Russian got knocked out, and then this Russian protested because, for fairly understandable reasons, the Ukrainian refused to shake her hand, but did like a sword tap, which is a very similar. So it was like a COVID way of doing this handshake, and so it was still an acknowledgement of respect for the sportsman, but she didn't obviously want to be seen shaking this person's hand. So they threw a protest, and so she got kicked out, and it really put in jeopardy her chances to get to the Olympics. She did go, and she got bronze, I think, and she either got a gold or a team bronze, or a bronze and a team gold, but she got 2 medals for Ukraine. But following the first incident, she was sort of inducted into NAFO. Mark Hamill, Luke Skywalker.
Yeah.
He's again, I think he's honorary. So like because of what he does with United 24, he's got one. There's been direct acknowledgement from the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. So they've actually tweeted out, I think it was in July of 22, sort of thanks. Like they were going through their thanking their partners. So like I think this was just after HIMARS had been sent over. They were tweeting out thanks, and they said, and like and in a break to our usual thing, we're going to thank this random internet organization.
It's got a high profile then.
It's surprising,
although it's sort of fairly unknown.
Yeah, it's weird. It's like if you know, it's very high profile. And the final person who I'll say, just to brag, who's again honorary, is Ambassador Valery Zaluzhny, to the ambassador to the UK, former chief of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. He's been spotted in official Ukrainian photographs, sort of when he was still the commander, with one of our patches on.
Cool. Okay.
So it's surprisingly, for what is I know a relatively niche internet subculture, it's surprisingly well known. Like if you know, you know. Yeah.
Okay.
If you're in the field, you do know. Yeah.
So if these are honorary members, what does a normal person have to be do to be a member? So
there's it's typically a donation requirement. So
right.
and there's no limit on the donation. And there's certain charities that have been sort of specifically vetted. Although there's been a bit of an argument recently. Georgian Legion is one who I've mentioned before. United 24 is another. If you're not sure, there's another one, Saint Javelin, which is based off of I'm probably going to annoy a few of your listeners here. It's the Madonna. It's based off of another comet, which is the Madonna with the AK-47. It was a resistance icon, but instead of an AK, she's got a Javelin anti-tank missile.
Right.
So that gives you an indication to the kind of humor we're talking about here. It's slightly anarchic, very internet-based humor. So this we can also buy. You can also, if you want, like St. Javelin is really good because they'll do. You can go and buy stuff from them. So if you want to donate, but you kind of want something as well, you can go and buy like a hat or T-shirts or jumpers, like and the not only is it stuff made in Ukraine, but all the profits go towards helping Ukraine as well. So if you're an unreformed capitalist like I am, not unreformed, but if you're like me and you like sometimes you want to have something to wear about town, to try and get your message across a little bit more, you can actually buy some merchandise that will actually help Ukraine as well, which is quite good. Sorry,
I just got a message on my phone.
Oh yeah.
Literally saying something about a T-shirt, and I was like, "That's creepy."
I get the shock by that as well because I got the same thing on my phone. It's like,
yeah, Garmin watches.
Yeah,
I'll take it off next time.
Other smart watches are available.
Yeah, we love them, but we hate them. Yeah. Okay. So, how does the work that you're doing sort of manifest itself?
So I'd like to think so, as well as the charity stuff, as well as the online. It's effectively at this point, because we know the arguments, they are literally memes. We can literally just post up an infographic with the counter because the lies are like fashion. They kind of come around again. So they'll start with Ukrainian is full of neo-Nazis, and it's not, and then it'll go to the biolabs, and it'll go to something else, and it's like we literally at this point, 3 years in, we can literally just dig out the rebuttal out of our meme folders that we all have, because it is so like repetitive, or it's NATO's fault, or so that's almost an automatic process now. And then there's the charity side, which so there are the good thing with the charity side is that there are charities that are just civilian stuff. So next year I'm doing a bike ride. I'm doing the Dragon Devil ride, which is terrifying me as just a concept of saying it. I'm doing that, and I'm doing it for a group from South Wales called UK4UA. And because of charity commission rules, they can't donate stuff to the armed forces. So that's quite a nice way of helping people, because like some people I understand are deeply uncomfortable donating to units, partly because you don't know if they're actually if it's actually going to be used, but also because the units are typically buying things that go bang. And some people are uncomfortable taking that step, which, I'm not going to harass people over because so there's that side of it. There's the stuff physically in Ukraine, and then the final side, we've put a lot of work into lobbying MPs. What in the UK it's MPs. I know the Americans did a lot of good work over the aid bill that passed. When was it? March, April.
Mm-hmm.
So they did a lot of good work lobbying senators across the aisle. So that's something
to do what?
To pass the bill.
Right.
So there was a bill that got held up in Congress for a long time, and the Americans were trying a lot of ways to get it passed. And there was a very small group of Republican congressmen. It was just enough to kind of cause issues with it to get it passed, because you've got to have a certain percentage of the vote and all the rest of it. So there was a lot of lobbying, especially on the Republican side, to get senators across the line on that side of it. And again, I don't speak the language. The French, all the other people, they're doing the same thing. They're lobbying sort of their elected representatives, shall we say. And I think with the EU guys, that also includes harassing Brussels. Sorry, not harassing. I mean, expressing their democratic will.
Yeah, right. Okay. So, in terms of the work you're doing to sort of offer a counter argument to the false stuff that they're saying, the Russians are saying, who's fact checking that?
That's a good question. So a lot of it is time to. That's a very good question. So a lot of it is like you can dig into it. So, I mean, a lot of the time, honestly, the Russians end up providing the information. So there's a whole thing just after they invaded about how they'd captured all these Ukrainian biolabs. And it's like, but then they provided the information about where these biolabs were. So they publicly provided this information, and it was things like a hospital that specialised in viral diseases. It was a university laboratory for biology students. And it's like, so you're telling me that they were cooking this up in some polytechnic university, really? So that's part of it. And like certain things, you can just look into the data. So the other side is, Ukraine's a hotbed of Nazism, and it has had some problems. Every country has a problem with the hard right, and so they're not unique in that regard. But you actually look at like the election results, and the entirety of the hard right, so not just one party, the entirety of the hard right in Ukraine, the last election got less than 2% of the vote, and they voted in a ethnic Jew as a leader with like 75% of the popular vote. And I'm sorry, a country that's supposedly full of neo-Nazis don't let Jews lead them typically. That's not how they tend to act when it comes to
So
Jewish
it's kind of like
people.
logic based.
Yeah. So some of it's logic, some of it is just literally looking at the data. So like you can literally go to Wikipedia and look up the election results and like the percentage of votes. And there are other things you have to do. So one of the things I sat down and did, there's a really great lecture series on YouTube called The Making of Modern Ukraine, I think it's called, by a lecturer called Timothy Snyder. Okay, at some point you do have to take something on faith, and he was going into the history of Ukraine. So not only was he going into the last 30 years, so Ukraine as it is now, but he was talking about he went right back to ancient Greece and how basically the fields of Elysium that are referenced in Greek mythology, what we know, sort of is now the wheat fields of Ukraine. It's the geographic area, if not what was there at the time. And so you have to see. Sometimes you do have to say, like, I just don't know. I need to trust somebody who's a relative expert. And so listening to like his lecture series on that really sort of, it blew my mind how much I still thought, like how much I was still inculcated into what we'd been told about Ukraine rather than like its actual history, which is really fascinating.
Okay. And I guess in a similar vein, how do you vet the people themselves who are joining NAFO?
Yeah, that's a cause of drama. It can be quite difficult. Well, no, so I mean, the good thing about NAFO is it's a very broad political alliance. Basically, if you're here to help Ukraine win, you're welcome. And that does cause arguments. It has caused some people to infiltrate. There's a lot of, especially with the big accounts. So there's a woman I can't dox. I don't even know her second name, called Oxy. She gets like a dozen impersonators a day because she's a big account. She does lots of fundraising, and so she gets thing. And so it's on. There is a measure of self-policing, and there's sort of a measure of looking into things, and there are arguments just because of the broad coalition of
and are those impersonators trying to counter the counter arguments?
They're mostly trying to.
Who are they?
They're mostly trying to take the money. They're scammers,
right?
And unfortunately, as much as I would think, it sounds a bit romantic of me here, but people like the way Ukraine's resisted shows some of the best in humanity in terms of uniting to deal with a horrible issue. Unfortunately, it also does bring out the worst. In this case, scammers who are trying to make a quick buck off of people's genuine charity.
They'll find any opportunity, won't they?
Oh yeah. And so, like I said, the people I'm doing this ride with, I challenged them back and forth quite a lot. I was going to do something from this year, but then I cracked my ribs and couldn't sit on a bike for too long. So I was like, there's no way I can do what I want to do. So I'm not going to do a fundraiser now for them next year. But you spend the time, and again, you start looking for people. You start looking for things to actually are trusted. So like that's why I recommend, if people aren't sure, UA24. It is the official people, like the very official people.
Right. Yeah. Okay. And so, what's the feedback from like Ukrainians themselves been?
A mixed bag, but usually pretty good. So like Oxy is a Ukrainian. She's not in Ukraine, but she is Ukrainian. She and her sort of, so that the Ukrainians who know that they love us. I've actually got video from a unit we, as a UK group, we fundraised just not for munitions, just these guys have been in the front for ages, and we literally sent them a big box of stuff from the UK. Like there was it was things like British tea, shortbread. Sort of, it was just a pack of stuff as a morale boost. Right. And I sent them. I designed a flag. I took someone else's design and stuck it on the Ukrainian flag. So I didn't do any design work. But there's a flag, and I had the prototype with me in London, and it got a bit of contention before people realised who we were. But then they loved it, so people loved it, and I ended up raising like £800 off sales of basically. I bulk ordered some and sold them on at like it was cost plus something, and we raised quite a lot of money. And then I sent the prototype with that box of stuff, and I've got a video of them thanking us for the box of stuff, and they got their shortbread biscuits and their cup of tea, and they got the flag. Yeah, and it's quite good to see that kind of stuff. Sorry, what was the question? I've rambled a little bit there.
Basically, yeah. What's the feedback been from the boots?
So boots on the ground, they tend to love us quite a lot. There's another group called the again, this shows you the internet humour, the 69th Sniffing Brigade. And
you can't beat a bit of that, can you?
And they've raised money. They do like trucks, and if you get an official NAFO truck, air quotes, it'll be in dark green, and then the disruptive pattern is actually different. So everyone's got an avatar, and it's based off of the old Shiba Inu meme, the Cheems meme. It's probably dating my internet culture a little bit. So there's a stupid internet meme years ago, and we kind of more or less revived it for our usage. So everyone's got a little avatar, and they've got like a stamp, and they basically stamp the disruptive style in the NAFO side. So people like the people Ukrainians in Ukraine, especially the ones fighting, know who we are. The ones who have fled, the refugees or even civilians in Ukraine, tend not to know so much. Although I have had people ask me, because since they saw like people like President Zelensky, Ambassador Zaluzhny, the new defense minister. His name escapes me.
Hmm.
They've mentioned them more, like we've been mentioned publicly recently, and so people have gone, "Oh, so who are these guys?"
Yeah. Okay. So has his work taken you sort of further afield?
It's not taking me further afield yet. What is it, like physically further afield?
Mm-hmm.
Not yet. No. I have a couple of times because as a rule, so like locally, I don't really drive. There's not much point where we are. Like round town, there's not a lot of point.
Making me feel bad.
but I do have a car, and I'm fine with long distance driving. And I mentioned this to somebody. I actually said, "Oh, I'm doing a round trip to Alton Towers," and I told them how far that was, and they were like, "Oh, would you be interested?" I was like, "If I had a passport, my old one's not current, and also if I told my mum and my dad that, oh, I'm going off to Ukraine because what they do is they do convoys of trucks, so secondhand trucks." There was a big thing about ULEZ trucks going to Ukraine.
Right.
That was us basically harassing Sadiq Khan. I say harassing, exercising our political desires to help. So instead of just scrapping old trucks,
Yeah.
there's now an option to send them to Ukraine.
Amazing. They can breathe in the fumes.
Well, those trucks don't last very long.
I'm being
yeah,
facetious.
I know.
Yeah, no, that is cool though.
So what they do is obviously they need drivers,
Yeah.
and what they do is they get the trucks or they buy the trucks, and then they stuff them full of supplies, so medical supplies and the rest of it, and then they get driven to Ukraine. And I've been really tempted, but I also know if I told my mum and my dad I was doing this, they would have a heart attack.
Yeah, I can't even get a motorbike, let alone drive a truck to a war zone. So yeah, I'd be.
I know I'm 35 and I'm taller than my mum and my dad. I'm still a little boy to them, like I think all kids are to their parents. So I dare not say that I'm going to do that, although I would like to.
just say you're going like on a package holiday to like Ibiza or something. Back in a fortnight.
I should have done that. Unfortunately, they're going to see this, and so they're going to know I'm lying through my teeth if I say that.
You didn't come back with much of a tan, Rhodri. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. No, it's that sounds fantastic. Just that in itself, just like a truck convoy. I mean, I'm, as you say, romanticizing it. A road trip full of supplies into a war zone. There's a sort of a liberation of freedom fighter element to that, which makes you feel good, isn't it? But that does sound awesome.
Yeah. I think so. Some people, I think, Ukraine is a war zone, but the trucks are sent to Lviv, which is in the very east, the very west of Ukraine.
Right.
And the front's something like 600 kilometers away. Like Ukraine's a really big country. In terms of geographic.
How big is it compared to UK?
It's bigger. It's quite a bit bigger. It might be. I'm not actually sure. I know it's massive though. I mean, it's the biggest geographic country in Europe, bar the parts of Russia that are in. Obviously, if you count Russia, but Russia's also in Asia, just because of how the geography works. I think it's the physically biggest country in Europe.
Right. Okay.
So it gives you an idea. It is, if you look at it on a map, it is massive. It's it's at least one US state, and US states are quite big. Mm-hmm. So it gives you an idea of the kind of the size.
Bigger than I thought it was.
Oh yeah, the geography of it is quite crazy. Because like Chernobyl, for instance, isn't that far from Kyiv.
Right.
Relative for Ukraine. So this is the thing, is that there's a lot of you wouldn't really want to drive across Ukraine because of how long it is. But like taking a train would be much more convenient, assuming there's not a war on.
Okay. So what's the future for NAFO and your involvement with it?
I'll keep going until I burn out. So one of the things we find is that obviously because you're dealing with a lot of dark stuff, so. I don't blame the news for not showing it, although I do get frustrated. There's a lot of dark stuff coming out of Ukraine. I mean, it made the news, but there was a couple of weeks ago, there was Russia dropped a cruise missile into a kids cancer hospital. Because there was a military defense building a mile and a half away, and bearing in mind the level of modern technology with weapons, they shouldn't be missing that badly. They just blew up an old folks' home a week or so ago, and that's just recent stuff. But honestly, the best thing I've seen that really documents war crimes and stuff that I can talk about on YouTube, because obviously there's some really dark stuff that I'm not even going to touch.
No.
There's this documentary, and for those of you who know me, you know I don't give out content warnings, but you need to be wary of this. It's a documentary called 20 Days in Mariupol. It was on, I think BBC and ITV have shown it, but I believe you can rent it from places. Maybe Amazon, I'm not certain. I saw it a while ago. And it's the footage of the fall of Mariupol that's like recorded on like handheld cameras and stuff. And it is brutal. So it is quite dark. So like people drop in and out. So I've had to take breaks. Usually when I have to take a break, I go to my Steam collection and see what games I haven't finished yet. Because it helps. Going to the gym helps me. But I'll keep going until I'm not needed anymore. I've got that kind of mindset just generally. But so people have said to victory for Ukraine, which is
People have what? Sorry.
So people have said they're gonna delete Twitter once. So basically, deleting Twitter would probably be the best way of saying I'm dropping out of dealing with this. And people have said like once Ukraine has won, I don't think it's a fantasy that they can win. I just think we need to we as in the collective we, not just the UK, need to give them what they need to win, and then we need to let them hit back into Russian airfields, which we're not currently letting them do. And there's all kinds of issues around that.
Why is that?
So the UK is, from what I've seen, the UK is fine with it, but because of weapon law, because of the international arms, I can't remember what it's called, but it's called ITAR, and it's basically if you sell a component, if you have a certain components in a weapon system, you get to have a say on how people use that system.
Right.
So we have stuff in our cruise missiles that is made in America. So America has a say on whether or not we can let Ukraine use Storm Shadow against Russia, like directly against Russian airfields in Russia, like against the Crimean Peninsula, against the occupied territories of Ukraine. That's all fine, but they've drawn the line at Russia for some reason. So people said to victory, but I may even stick around and help sort of campaign for helping with the rebuild, because it's the most destructive war since World War II, and there needs to be, once they've won, there needs to be something like the 21st century version of the Marshall Plan to get Ukraine back on its feet.
Can you explain what that is for the people like me who don't know what that is?
Okay, so the Marshall Plan was basically the rebuild of Europe, well, Western Europe after World War II.
Right.
And I don't know who it's named after. I guess a guy called Marshall who came up with the plan, or at least authored most of it, or took credit, because I know how that works. And basically it was the rebuild of everything in Western Germany, so West Germany, France, various countries. The Soviet Union claimed to take care of the rest of it, but Soviet Union.
Yeah.
And that, it came about partly because we realised that things like the Treaty of Versailles were contributing factors to the rise of the house painter in Germany. So I like the term house painter. That Winston Churchill very famously called Adolf Hitler, rather than actually refer to him by name.
Sorry, he called Adolf Hitler
the house painter.
The house painter.
Yeah, he was, because Hitler was rejected from a art school in Austria.
Yeah. So
Churchill would sort of just insult him all the time by calling him a house painter.
Yeah.
So I always refer to him like that because it's just funny. But yeah, there needs to be a Marshall Plan for Ukraine, and we need to work out what to do with Russia. I'm not advocating invading Russia before anybody has a go at me in the comments.
Trust me, no one listens to this. I won't read any comments.
But there needs to be something done, because what happened after World War II was the West, for two reasons. One was to get them into NATO, and the second one was to get the Marshall Plan approved. Was they came up with the lie of the Clean Wehrmacht, where they said, it wasn't the German soldiers were honourable. Like, no, they actually committed quite a lot of war crimes. But because there wasn't the information age, they could at least. It was a lie, and I'm kind of against that on principle. But I understand why it was said, although we should have created a record later on, like more publicly. But the problem is, what's going to happen in Russia is Putin's going to fall. There is no version of this where he gets out of this alive, because Russia is very famously very bad at having peaceful transitions of power. It's happened exactly once in 1,000 years. So it's not exactly got a good track record for peaceful process of power. And then what happens next, I don't know, because anytime, any politician who's going to go out and say, we need to help Russia rebuild, they're going to get say not physically but politically lynched for it, because like the war crimes are in HD and often recorded by Russia themselves and celebrated. And that concerns me, but at the same time, I would rather deal with that later and deal with complete Ukrainian victory. So that includes liberation of all territories, including Crimea, destruction of the Kerch Bridge, because I was looking into that, and part of the reason why they built the Kerch Bridge the way they did was to specifically make it harder for Ukraine to use ports in eastern Ukraine, because it set height and weight limits based on how high the bridge is and how wide it is, which is a very evil and cynical way to build a bridge. But that needs to go. I mean, if nothing else,
Right.
it doesn't have planning permission. Obviously then Ukraine needs to rebuild, and it needs help doing that, because I mean I think it's an area the size of Portugal has been mined in Ukraine.
Wow.
And that includes the Chernobyl exclusion zone. So there is a literal radioactive zone in the middle of Ukraine that is full of landmines, and no one has any idea how to demine that, because usually what you would do is you would run a mine clearing device over and you would blow the mines up. Doing that in Chernobyl is a really stupid idea, because you're going to just get radioactive dust everywhere.
Yeah.
But going back to what I was trying to say about Russia, I hope that Russia could sort of reform the way Western Germany did. I just don't see a path to it, unfortunately, because there are, I know it in the circles, it's very popular to like hate on all Russians, but there are like Russians that are really stuck. So like the LGBTQ, the LGBTQ community are literally criminals in Russia at the moment because of some of the laws that Putin has passed.
Since all this started, you mean? Or?
Well, the anti-gay stuff in Russia has been ratcheting up for years.
Right.
So that sort of. So I mean, people like them need help, if to get out, if nothing else. But yeah, I just don't see a good path, because the problem is the only questioning of Putin's authority in Russia is coming from the right of Putin. So it's the people who think he's not imperialist enough. There are absolutely some good Russian. So I say I'm going to get attacked for that. So people like Gary Kasparov, the former world chess champion, he's very against Putin, very pro sort of actually getting to the brass tacks of democratizing Russia. There's a UK-based Russian philosopher called Vlad Vleksa, who, again, he's living in the UK. I don't know if he's gotten British citizenship yet, but he's somebody who's very pro and wants desperately for Russia to be reformed. Again, I'm gonna cause some more controversy here. The Navalnys are not the answer.
The what now?
The Navalnys. So Alexei Navalny and his widow.
Right.
He was being held up as this great champion of liberal Russia, and unfortunately, people just wanted to see what wasn't there. So they wanted to see, this great reformer. I mean, he didn't deserve being murdered in a gulag, which is what happened to him. But Oh, that sounds really mean to say the but, like it doesn't count. Like there's a thing from was it Game of Thrones. My dad says if you say anything after but, it doesn't count.
Yeah.
He wasn't a reformer, and he famously referred to after the occupation of Crimea. He was asked if he was president tomorrow, would he return Crimea? And he came out about a line about Crimea is not a sausage sandwich to be passed about around at a party. So he was very for keeping Crimea as Russian. And then when he launched his Russian campaign, his presidency campaign, before he was murdered, he included the updated Russian map with Donbass, with the 4 oblasts and Crimea as part of Russia. And his wife, after his passing, had said that the funds that were being given to Ukraine to fight Russia should be given to her for fighting corruption.
Right.
Yeah. So the people who are actually resisting Putin need to be defunded, like actively. And so
that's quite a bold statement.
Yeah, and that completely passed everybody's, because they were they gave her a lot of slack for her husband had just been murdered, but I'm still like, you probably should actually help Ukraine with their cause. That would get you what you want, but so I want Russia to be able to reform. I just don't know how it gets there, which is a bit of a depressing subject. Sorry about that.
Well, yeah, war is a depressing thing, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, war is. I mean, was it war is hell? That's the very famous quote.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many famous quotes about war. I've been taken out enough times with Call of Duty to probably seen all of them. When you die in Call of Duty and you get the
I've forgotten about that. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry, if I.
No, I'm just thinking about where to go from there. It's as you say, it's a lot, isn't it? It's yeah, it's a. I'm just fascinated by the fact that you're doing all this yourself, in mid Wales, in Llandrindod.
Yeah, I mean, I know there are one or two other NAFO people semi-local, just because of conversations we've had.
Right.
But for me, I mean, I said, I got into it for knowing people, but I also I'd like to think I'd have come to it anyway, because my mum and my dad did a very good job of instilling like a very strong moral core in me, even though I maybe disappoint my mum by being a heathen atheist. No, I don't. She's very cool with it. But she did a very good job of instilling the idea of right and wrong. So I'd like to think I'd have come to this anyway. But yeah, it is interesting. It is weird because like I do this thing online and I like talk to normal people and they're like, "You did what?" Yeah. So
how does it fit in with the rest of whatever you do in life?
So it kind of does fit in a little bit. So by day, I'm a mild-mannered cartographer. I make maps. I say mild-mannered, more grumpy, especially if I've not had coffee yet. And then, so I mean, that's like the day job is map making. So I do find a bit of an interest in the geography of everything, which is why I sort of know a little bit more about the size and shape of Ukraine than some people. But so I have talked to like in one of the Discord groups about how they could do certain things to help with mapping. I don't know if any of us got taken through or stolen. And if it has been stolen, that's great. If it hasn't, it hasn't. There's things I've suggested based on my own experiences. And part of what I've done is literally just hung out in Discord calls with Ukrainians who want to learn English.
Okay.
So just talking, which is quite nice. Although it's weird because I started doing it. I did that occasionally during the Six Nations, and so I'd have my webcam on and they'd be like, "Why are you wearing obviously Wales team?" And so the 30 minutes or an hour, whatever it was, they were talking to us or talking to me. I was trying to give them a crash course in rugby.
Right.
Because it was a way of getting them to practice practice English. But yeah, there is some dovetail. Like I had very limited involvement with sort of helping with the refugees who got moved here. Like I've met them since. like sort of around town, and I can spot a Ukrainian license plate because there's a flag and the Cyrillic, and I sort of chat to them, but I very very tangentially related at the start with obviously them moving here as well, not like helping them physically move, but just making sure we knew where they were going to be able to go.
How many Ukrainians are in Llandrindod at the moment?
I have no idea. I have no idea anymore because there was a lot to start, but then some have gone home. So as parts have gone liberated, they've gone home or they've moved to other countries because I know there's still Ukrainians around because I see them like dropping their kids off to Curnow in the morning. Sort of if I'm going into work or whatever, I'll see them moving around town. I occasionally see a couple if I'm up in Newtown. There's some up there. I don't. It's kind of not my area to keep too much of a track on them.
No,
but it's good. I mean, my mum also said they would go to the church because my mum has just retired from being a priest.
Right. Which church?
Holy Trinity.
Right. Okay.
Hence the comment about the joke about being a heathen.
Yeah.
So she was saying like at the start there was quite a few, but then they've either found that the Anglican Church isn't quite what they were looking for because of Eastern Orthodox Christianity is quite different.
In what way? Do you know?
Just like the ways that the Mass is celebrated for a lot of the part.
Is it quite high, sort of almost Catholic sort of influence? Is it?
Well,
it's all like traditional.
Yeah, it is a lot more. So it's not quite it. Yeah, Holy Trinity is not quite what they were expecting. I think that's going to be part of it. But I think some of them have gone home or they found relatives to live with sort of closer to home. I don't blame them. I get grumpy if I don't get to sleep in my own bed. Never mind like get ejected 1,500 miles away from my house. That may or may not still be there because someone's dropped an artillery shell on it. So I get why they've gone home.
Yeah.
Or they've found other communities. But I do think it's great that the town council have let them join in with the Remembrance Day parades.
Right.
So so the 22, 23, and I don't imagine Marcy is going to ban them from the next one. They've been allowed to go as waving Ukrainian flag, putting wreaths down for obviously because there's fathers, sons, mothers, daughters who are still over there or have died in defence of their country. So it's nice to see that the ones who are here are being allowed to still be Ukrainians, but also get involved with the town side of things. That's really nice as well.
Absolutely. So you're pretty clued up on, or you seem.
I think Seam is probably a good option here.
Yeah, but on like the bigger picture and sort of. The bigger picture of the war in Ukraine and the nuances there. Is that something that you just picked up on, like, or all NAFO sort of members like you, like similar sort of knowledge?
Some know a lot more. It depends. So everyone in NAFO has their area of knowledge, right? So or area of interest. I'm slightly on the autism spectrum, so I'm a data nerd. I'm the kind of person who will sit there and read facts and figures and absorb stuff. And like, if I'm working, I've got a podcast on, or I've got a literal lecture series from Harvard or Yale on. Like, so I'm constantly trying to take in new information. The person I'm currently dating, she deals with scammers quite a lot. That's like how she contributes to the thing. So she's not so much on the fighting and arguing on Twitter. She's focused a lot more on dealing with scammers. And she's very good at exposing scammers to the point where the UK group we just go, is this person legit? Just hand it off to her. And she's got a subgroup she's not a subgroup, but it makes it sound way more organized than it is. Like her main group of people will look at scammers and stuff like that.
Right. So
people different areas of knowledge. We've actually got people who are fellas who are fighting right now. One of the guys who isn't NAFO but is very, very popular within the circles, he's been at the front now for a couple of weeks after obviously being back and having a break. It's interesting to see, like some people are more they know a lot more about the on the ground because they are literally on the ground, and some of us are sort of looking at a high level. One of the guys who I chat to quite often, so to avoid the vagaries of the Twitter algorithm, we have groups to organize, so things like fundraising, and he's very good at fundraising, and his thing is to push fundraisers and just push fundraisers, and he grinds my gears occasionally because he just constantly pushes fundraisers, but it's good because it needs doing. So in terms of the abstract, I'm probably more up on the abstract side of it than some, but then I'm not so good at the scamming. I'm not so good at dealing with scammers. I'm not so good at pushing fundraisers. Partly because when I push if I'm doing a fundraiser myself, my humor doesn't quite come across properly in text. In fact, it doesn't often come across properly in normal conversation because
I know the feeling.
I'll make a joke and everyone thinks I'm being completely serious.
Yes. I always get told like just don't even bother. No one's gonna get it.
Or no, well, my problem is I'll say something completely outrageous, but I'll say it in a deadpan way, and everyone's like, "Was he being serious?" Yeah. So I have to be careful with my jokes and all that. Like, my good example would be the one I put on my on thing to promote things. I mean, busy. Actually, no, I haven't. So that's the kind of thing but there's guys and gals who are very good at pushing fundraising. There are people like me I tend to be more in the abstract. There are people who they're called forgers, and they like produce our little avatars for when you've donated, but also they produce a lot of the memes that come out because my memes look awful and they're really, really niche. Right. So when we celebrated our birthday, because my first use of NAFO was on the 24th of May 22. Right. And I'm a colossal nerd, and so this time around, because I just didn't put the dates together in my head last year. I did a meme, and it was a cover of. Do you read Terry Pratchett at all?
No.
Okay, so this is going to be an explanation. So there's a book called Night Watch, and during that, it's a cover, and it's a replica of another painting called Night Watch. And the events of the main events of the book take place on the 24th of May, and it's a revolution against a tyrannical leader. And so I in very bad Photoshop, it wasn't even Photoshop, it was like paint.net or something, because Photoshop is beyond.
I like paint.net.
Yeah, but like, so paint.net is like my level of photoshopping.
Yeah.
I'm using photoshopping in the same way you use Hoover, so like as a generic thing. And I replaced all of the characters on this picture with like the different avatars, and then I had like the main character being Zelensky, and I posted it out. And I got like 4 people who thought that was funny. I was like, yes, 4 people out of 100,000 plus got my joke. Yeah. So I'm not so good. I'm not so good at the memes, but other people are very good at that. So we all, to quote the film, are doing our part. Yeah. And yes, there is a meme of somebody with a Shiba Inu, although it's not ours, of I'm doing my part from Starship Troopers. But that's not ours. It's just a useful gift of reference.
Yeah. Cool. So I'm not suggesting that we all. I mean, it'd be great if we did, but everyone suddenly becomes a member of NAFO. But what can the average person in the UK do to help?
That's a good question. So the average person in the UK. The single best thing you can do is you can contact your MP,
right? And
you can find out who that is from They Work For You. I find that more easy to use than the Gov website. So they work for you, and as well as that, they've got all their expenses and stuff like that on there. It's all publicly published, very nicely formatted. So you can speak to your MP about helping with you, sort of supplying more stuff. That's how we got things like ULEZ stuff through. I'm pretty certain that I have not contacted him too much yet, but our new MP will be no doubt sick of my name appearing in his inbox by the time he leaves Parliament. So there are charities out there. So I'm doing one for UK for UA, which is South Wales based charity. They're good because they're not just taking on. They don't just want money. They want stuff. So they want things you might just have lying around the house. So if you've got like old crutches you're not using, they'll take those as donation. expired but still sealed medical stuff. So like bandages that are
Right.
they're out of date, but they're still sealed because they're still useful.
Absolutely, they are. I've often wondered what to do with that.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff. I'll take that. So there's other charities out there. There's UK4UA. So I just mentioned those. Sorry, my brain's fried. There. And there's also United 24, which is like the big Russian. It's not Russian one. It's the official Ukrainian charity. That's English language. People might have a bit more of an issue with that because I think they do put money directly towards units. So people might be uncomfortable.
When you say that, you mean like military units?
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
So because they're a Ukrainian charity, they're not bound by UK Charity Commission rules. If you're looking to trade your car in, you could look at the. I know one of the garage I use for my MOTs has had people who have traded it in, but it's gone to Ukraine because there's something you can do with tax on it. I believe it's something to do with the ULEZ or something like that.
Right, okay.
So it's the scrappage scheme. You can send it to Ukraine. These vehicles in Ukraine, they don't have a very long life because they're civilian trucks. They're not designed to be dealing with drones and 152 artillery rounds and small arms fire. But it's something, right? It's they can move supplies around. They can get the injured out.
How are they managing to run vehicles out there? Like surely, like just diesel would eventually run out, and
well, you think so, but they've been
that might be. Sorry if that's a stupid question.
Well, no, it's a good question. I mean, the Ukrainian logistics have been really good. They've had to be, because they're dealing with. If you just list off the Western tanks, you've got Challenge 2, you've got the Abrams, you've got the Leopards. Those are three very different tanks. The Challenger 2 has a different gun entirely to the other two. And there's obviously difference between Imperial and metric and all kinds of stuff. So they've been very good at dealing with the logistics. Some units are using NATO small arms, so things like the M6 or the M4, which is 5.56 mil. Other units are still using the AK-47 or the AK-74, which is 7.62 short. So they've been very good at dealing with all the logistics. And they are getting fuel. The magic of how they get that is I have no idea.
Right.
But they don't seem to be struggling for fuel as they are for other things.
Right.
And that's why I keep saying we need to lobby MPs and the elected representatives. Because the West, the collective West, not us necessarily, have huge manufacturing capacity if we choose to use it, and we should.
Okay. So, I mean, one thing I've kind of observed or seen about the war out there is how there's this big, almost like a juxtaposition of trench warfare, which harks back to like Second World War and beyond, and sort of further back, but then really modern sort of retrofitting of drones to drop a grenade into a tank, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Is it genuinely that sort of opposed, and is it actually like that, or is there not as much drone sort of stuff as you think, or is there not as much trench warfare as you think, or is it as it's being portrayed?
It's probably more because the news is very, very against showing a lot of it. So the entrenched positions are incredibly entrenched. So I've seen I don't know how many hundreds of videos of the sort of directly from the Ukrainian firing position of the tanks coming out and getting taken out from all different areas because of the positions. I've seen and watched trench clearing videos, and not the stuff you see on the news. This is the stuff that might make a few people not sleep very well at night. Levels of detail, but on the flip side, you have Kursk, where they pretty much walked in unopposed, or at least relatively unopposed, where Ukraine have taken a fairly large chunk of a Russian oblast. This is why last summer the counteroffensive struggled, was because they were trying to go through dug-in minefields, and the drones have really made it a nightmare. And that's why you're seeing a lot of this sort of almost World War I, World War II style engagements, is because that drone technology shift has just changed the battlefield. So like the machine gun did in World War One, and like what what would the revolution really be in World War II, because there wasn't because like the tank. I mean, the development in things like tanks, I would guess, development in things like airplanes. So just the technology changed the warfare. I mean, it's the old adage, right? Is that an army is prepared to fight the last war it fought. So the British army and the American army is mostly set up to fight asymmetric counterinsurgency right now,
right?
Because of Afghanistan and Iraq. Although the Americans are doing a very good job of switching back to peer combat, because they've got the worry of China, and also because Putin has said things like, we want the Russian Empire back, which involves going into NATO countries, so the Baltics. So that's a big concern. So drones have definitely really changed things. I mean, getting away from the land combat a little bit, the drones in the Black Sea, the Black Sea. I get my seas confused. The drones, the Sea Baby drones, they've basically penned the Russian Black Sea fleet into a swimming pool size area of water, not in relative terms. And Ukraine has no large. It's got some like river boats and stuff. It's got some like close-in coastal vessels, but it's got no large battleships or destroyers. It's got no, what's it, blue water navy? I can never remember the terms because boats, not interested. But they've got no large surface combatants. And yet they managed to take out a large chunk of the Russian fleet through things like these drones, the sea drones. I hope we're taking note, because there's going to be a lot of changes we're going to have to consider. Because a lot of the old systems aren't designed to do what we need them to do. But yeah, I would like, going back to Region Point, there's a lot of trench warfare just because the Ukrainians are very well dug in, which is why the Russians are really struggling to get them out. But on the flip side, it means it's also hard for Ukraine to attack because Russia is also very well dug in. And then you pop your head out. It's almost like you pop your head out and you get sniped. There's the same thing with a drone now. You show your position with an artillery piece, and unless you're a self-propelled gun, you're going to get either counter batteried because the radars are really good now, or you're going to get a drone.
Who would you say has got the upper hand at this point?
That's tough.
Again, I'm
It's a fair question.
We get something from
it's a fair
news.
question.
We're
So
saying we're not getting the full picture, are we? So
yeah. So I mean, overall, it's probably broadly. I don't like the word stalemate because that's what's being used by sort of the Russian side of it. But so like in certain areas, Ukraine is definitely doing a lot of stuff like Kursk. It's in Russia, fighting in Russia, which hasn't happened since 1941. So that gives you an idea of like how long that's been since that's happened. But they've lost ground in certain places, but typically what they're doing is trading space for time. They're attriting the Russian forces. So like there's a town called Volodya that might fall, or probably sort of in the next few weeks. But again, it was used to attrit the Russian forces because they have taken like some crazy losses. I think we're getting close to 650,000 dead and wounded from the Russian side, roughly. And okay, yes, I will admit that is the Ukrainian defense numbers. But when we were able to check it against what Russians were paying, so Russia used to publish all its finances, and when we could check like the death benefits that were being paid out, the Ukrainian numbers were within 5% of what Russia was paying out, roughly. So obviously you're doing an average combat pay, average death pays. It was about 5% difference. So they're pretty accurate numbers. Well, at least they were. I don't know how much they are now because, funnily enough, when we worked that out, Russia made the finances state secret. Like how after they blew up a bunch of oil refineries, oil production numbers are now a state secret. So it's kind of hard to say who's got the upper hand. In terms of technology and tactics, it's Ukraine. I don't like using the meat wave analogy, but Russia does have bodies that can throw out a problem.
But they're pretty pissed off bodies, though, aren't they?
They're starting to get that way. You are seeing a lot. I am starting to see a lot more footage of Russians unaliving themselves.
Wow. To
put it in a polite way, and that's happening more and more.
Really?
Yeah, it's
that's
not
tragic, isn't it?
I understand why you're saying that, but the Russians in Ukraine volunteered to be there. So everyone talks about Russia being a conscript army. The conscripts are internal to Russia, so the ones fighting in Kursk are conscripts, which is probably why they're surrendering so much, because they don't want to fight.
Those are referred to as being pissed off ones, right?
Yeah, but the ones who are actually in Ukraine, they have volunteered to be there. They are what's called contractniki, so they've signed a contract,
right.
So they're volunteers. So I have less sympathy for them. So you're starting to see that. You're starting to see. You're not quite seeing Gulf War I levels of surrender, but it's going. It's. I don't want to sound like I'm huffing hopium here and saying I hope it's going to happen, so it will. I think you might start seeing that next year, because that's when Russia really hits a problem with armor. And again, that's not me like pushing propaganda. You can literally buy the satellite imagery of Russian ammo storage yards, sort of like in Siberia. You can literally buy the imagery, and you can literally sit there and count how many tanks have been moved or have been things, and they are really running out. Right. I think Ukraine can win, but I don't think it's going to be they're going to sweep the field. I think what's going to happen is you're going to get more like a 1917 collapse, where someone, probably an oligarch, has enough, and then the army turns around. I mean, it almost happened with Wagner last summer. The Yevgeny Prigozhin had enough of the treatment of the Russian, or specifically the Wagner group. He had enough of like the bad provisioning, and so turned his men and marched on Moscow, which was immensely entertaining.
Yeah. So it's going to be that, right? So it's going to be that sort of a thing that
I think that's what's going to end it. I might get told off a little bit by fellow people for not being so hyped, but I think that's how they win. Is Putin falls, and somebody who's sensible realizes that the only way that we're going to talk to Russia going forward is if they get everybody completely out of Crimea and the rest of Ukraine, and anybody who, I'm not saying Stalin was killed by Beria, but mysteriously doesn't have a heart attack. I can see someone being very sensible and go from very, not from a we're reformed and we're now liberal, but from a we want food and money, please. Yeah. And they would hand over almost what happened with Slobodan Milosevic, right? Is he got basically he was handed over as a bribe for please stop sanctioning us, and I can see that happening not necessarily to Putin, but to like sort of the flunkies. So the woman who's been charged by the International Criminal Court for basically trafficking Ukrainian children en masse, I think she probably wouldn't be thrown out of a window, but she might be handed over as an appeasement. So the lower downs would get handed over, but I don't see a sweep the field thing, but I do see like they just finally collapse, and that collapse might lead to a sweep the field. I'm using a.
What do you mean by sweep the field?
So as in killing every last Russian in Ukraine, right. or taking every last position. Okay. I don't think that's how they win, because that's not how wars are won. The only time that happened was with Nazi Germany,
right?
And that was because effectively you had a completely crazy person running a country.
So what sort of time scale?
I wouldn't.
It's almost impossible to say.
Yeah, it's impossible to say. I mean, authoritarian regimes, they look strong and stable until they aren't. I mean, obviously I was one, not even one when. So I was. No. I was 2. I was 2 years old when the Soviet Union completely fell.
And you don't remember it?
No. I had to read a history book. So I was too when the Soviet Union pretty much fell.
Yeah.
But obviously I've gone back and listened to history. I've read books, and they were basically, as far as the Soviet Union was concerned, everyone else outside the Soviet Union was concerned, it was strong and stable, and everyone wanted to stay in there and be friends. I say friends. But as far as they were concerned, it was all strong and stable and powerful. And then there was some reforms happened. So obviously Germany left before the collapse. So obviously the Berlin Wall came down in '89, and then so Germany had reunited before the Soviet Union fell. But then when the Soviet Union fell, it was because they were trying to do reforms to like effectively sort the economy out, because the economy was about to fall over. And then KGB hardliners decided to do a coup in Moscow, and that's the very famous thing about Swan Lake coming on. So when the coup happened, the Soviet TVs, they didn't know what to do, because do you take a side? Do you not take a side? So instead they put Swan Lake on the TV.
Right.
So every time I talk about Russia falling, I now have Swan Lake in the back of my head.
Yeah.
But before then, everyone thought the Soviet Union was going to stay. Political realists like John Mersheimer, he was saying at the time, the USSR is never going to go away. This is what it is. We have to deal with it. Realpolitik. We have to put up with it. And then within a few months of him saying stuff like that, it had fallen over. And you now had... so the coup happened. Then Ukraine left as one of the first to go. They declared independence, just ignoring... So they had a vote, declared independence, and left, which caused real issues to the rest of the USSR, because Ukraine was the second biggest part of the USSR, the second biggest single entity of the USSR, and it was also the production powerhouse, so it has a lot of the factories. So a lot of the factories, a lot of the raw materials. So so Russia bailed, and then that destroyed it. So yeah, I can't put a time frame, because I mean, people talk about the economy in Russia, and it is absolutely knackered.
Is it almost like a war of resources at this point?
Yes. So it's a war of resources and a war of production. So Russia's got the resources. As what I was saying earlier, we need to sort of collectively as the West decide that. So I'm pro Ukraine, but it's not about Ukraine. It's about as well. It's about the democracy. So it's, do we in the West think a democracy that has flaws? Can we get off our lazy asses and actually help this people and produce? So like West has the production capacity to outdo Russia's resources, and that's sort of where so Russia's got all the Soviet legacy stuff, whereas we have the ability to make things. We have a much higher capacity to make things, especially when you're talking about 155mm artillery, because that's a very standard caliber now in NATO. It's also the South Korean standard caliber, and because of their situation, they are a very heavily artillery based army. Yeah. So it's going to come down to logistics versus resources. And if we do actually take it seriously, and I don't think we really have, we can win on the logistics. I say we, the West, and I'm including Ukraine, democracy in general. Sound like a Helldivers 2 thing there, don't I? Democracy. It's currently a war of resources. It needs to turn to a war of logistics, almost, because logistics is actually how you win a war, and also the will to fight. And Ukrainians know what they're fighting for. They're fighting for their homes. They're fighting for the person next to them, their friend, their family. They're fighting for their culture, their language. There's more fighting the dog of Ukraine. So it's that awful adage. It's not the size of the dog in the fight; it's the size of the fight in the dog. If we cut off resources tomorrow, say the entirety of West goes, nope, we're done. Ukrainians are still going to fight. Having spoken to a bunch of them, what you'll start seeing an almost not suicide bombing, but you'll see a war of resistance. So you'll see Molotov cocktails. You'll see, and you're seeing it in eastern Ukraine, assassinations, car bombing. That's how they'll fight. They will still
already
resist.
happening, is it?
That's always happening. I mean, the SBU, the security, I can't remember what it's called, but basically the Ukrainian spies, headed by Kirill Budanov, they are literally hacking into Russian naval captains' Strava accounts, finding where they are on their runs when they're in Russia, and assassinating them.
Wow.
There is some like Mossad stuff happening in Ukraine, like with the SBU. But if Ukraine gets occupied, it's going to be a decades-long war of resistance. It's going to make the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan look like a tea party.
Right. Okay.
Again, to steal a quote from not my favorite book series, but my favorite film series, although it's not in the films. I know I sound very hawkish here, very hawkish, and I'm not particularly pro-war. I'm just very pro the things that war is defending. I don't love the sword for its sharpness or the bow or the arrow for its point, but for the things they protect. So I'm very pro liberal democracy. So it's like, okay, if we have to have if we have to be involved in this war, which we should be because of the Budapest Memorandum, and I'll mention what that was. So for the people who don't know, if we have to be involved, we should just go full in.
Right.
Maybe, possibly not boots on the ground, but basically, we should be almost basically what we would do for a war production. We should be really considering it. Again, we in the West, not just us, because we haven't got the UK. We haven't got that much resource just because of the nature of the island and all the rest of it. But the West should definitely be looking at this. Is existential for the idea of democracy. It's the idea of, can the democracy, the small struggling democracy, can it go up against a tyrant and win? Which is what we're looking at. Which is what I've said. I have said it more on like my own social media. It's why it's quite an existential issue, I find as well. It's, do we still have the belief in freedom and democracy to commit to helping? And to go back to what I was saying, the Budapest Memorandum, because I think it's quite an important point to make. Of all the countries that have ever had nuclear weapons, only one country has ever given those up. And again, I'm not pro-nuke, because who would want to be pro-apocalypse? So if you're anti-nuclear weaponry, you need to help. You need to support Ukraine, because Ukraine was the only country who's ever given up their nukes under what's called the Budapest Memorandum, signed in Budapest, funnily enough, in 1994, and it was primarily a signatory between Ukraine and Russia, but it also included the USA and us, the UK, not the Cloud of West. I should be really more clear on that. So it was a four-way agreement between the United States of America, United Kingdom, Ukraine, and the Russian Federation. Because at the time, Ukraine had the third largest amount of nuclear weapons in the world, because obviously it had all the stuff that had come out of the Soviet Union. And people say, oh, well, all the launch keys were in Russia, which they were, but who do you think was running the Russian nuclear program? It wasn't, the Ukrainians were doing a lot of that stuff themselves. So they could have maintained it, but so they gave up their nuclear weapons. And they gave up nuclear weapons, strategic missiles, and quite a few strategic bombers, ironically, to Russia. And frustratingly, I say frustratingly, but it's obviously bad, it's beyond frustration, is that some of those missiles have been proven to be fired back from Russia to Ukraine during this war. But the agreement was, Ukraine gives up its nukes, the other three parties will guarantee its sovereignty, as marked down in the 1991 borders, which includes Crimea. So if we want to live in a world where the sword of Damocles is not hanging over our head in the form of nuclear apocalypse, we have to support Ukraine again, because otherwise, if we back out and say, well, actually, no, you're on your own, other countries are going to go, well, I want nukes. Do you think the Polish are looking at Russia being imperialist again and going, yeah, we're not going to get nukes? Of course, they're thinking about it. A tin box dictator somewhere else is going to go, well, I want nukes because having nukes stops Uncle Sam and the UK from coming in risking escalation management. Like, if Russia didn't have nukes, we would have given the okay for Storm Shadows to be dropped onto the Kremlin.
Yeah.
We would have been like, yeah, that's fine. Because the Kremlin is a legitimate target because it's center of military control. Before anyone complains I'm advocating for taking out random civilians, I'm not. So we'd have okayed those strikes because there's no fear of nukes. So a dictator somewhere. So I mean, North Korea literally did this. They got nukes so that they can now say, "Oh, well, we've got nukes, so don't get involved if we go after South Korea." China can say that about Taiwan. So that's part of it as well. Is if you want to live in a world where nukes either don't exist anymore, or they're not going to be taken seriously as a threat. Again, you kind of need to look at supporting Ukraine.
Right.
I've really practiced these arguments elsewhere. That's why I'm
able
to do. So I've really practiced these arguments elsewhere. That's why I'm able to rattle them off. I'm not super quick on my feet. I've just had these arguments a lot.
Yeah, no, it's not a connection I've made. If I'm honest, it's
one of the things I've had to learn to do is to pitch the why you should support Ukraine to pretty much every political group, because there's a very broad coalition that supports Ukraine and a very broad one that's against it. So you kind of have to learn to argue on their terms.
Within where?
Well, just generally, so mostly Twitter, Facebook. Even in person, I've had I would say friends, but I've had some very left-wing people I know and some very right-wing people I know. So some have supported Ukraine, some are against Ukraine. So you have to learn to argue on their terms. So like the anti-nuclear argument is obviously like much more of a green argument. It's like if you're against nuclear weapons, which typically is a very left-wing position. Not that I'm against the position. I think it's actually not a bad idea. I'd love to live in a world where there were no nuclear weapons. I'd love to live in a world like that. So you have to make an argument on their principles. So, and so, if I was talking to somebody who was quite on the right, I'd make an argument about liberty and democracy and freedom and that kind of stuff. And someone like me who's a wishy-washy liberal, I'm going, well, it's the right thing to do, guys. We should just do it. So.
Okay. Cool. Well,
I've spoken quite a lot.
That's a lot to take in, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
This is now smashed the record for the longest VIP podcast episode. So congrats. And I'll just hit stop. And also my camera there has well and truly run out of memory. I'm surprised the batteries actually lasted all right. So I'm going to pause this one. Yeah, no. So I what I like to do is I record the bulk of the episode and then have a bit of a decompression afterwards. Normally I'd take out a whiskey, but I've actually run out. And being technically unemployed at this point, whiskey is a luxury item, which I'm having to forego at this point. But thanks for coming on the.
That's all right. Thanks for letting me natter for quite a long time about subjects that are probably a little bit more not what you're expecting.
That's quite all right. No, I mean it's kind of the point, isn't it? That's what it's all about. Is starting off on one topic and then seeing where it goes, really. Because it's cool, it's informative to learn about this stuff, but it's entertaining too. Not like I don't want to say
not how it's funny, but yeah, it's interesting.
It's intriguing and it engages your brain and it makes you think about stuff. Like not entertaining as in the war in Ukraine, but it's
Yeah, I mean, I'm just in general. I'm a big fan of keeping myself engaged with stuff. So if you see me walking around town, I've usually got not headphones in. So I've got the the bone conduction ones. Right. I've usually got an audio book on or a podcast. I am the person I'm dating drives up the wall because I was single for a while, and so I'm used to just having it on, and it used to annoy her because I listen to stuff like, oh crap, I should actually be doing boyfriend things. And that's partly just because I'm learning something. I'm a big fan of just learning stuff. You put a book near me for long enough, and I'll read it.
Yeah.
It doesn't really matter what the content is. So I've read I read all kinds of stuff. I mean, I've even read like things like Das Kapital and Mein Kampf, just because the book's been around me long enough for me to go, I'm going to pick it up and read it. I don't necessarily agree with anything that's in those books, specifically the last book, but it, because I think part of it is I'm interested in knowing why something is the way it is. So not just is something good, bad, correct, wrong, but why.
I think it's good to challenge your understanding and the narrative as well, isn't it?
Again, much to my mum's chagrin, I was a big fan of Christopher Hitchens whilst he was still alive, and he was a British emigrant to the US, so he was living in the US, but he spent a lot of his he did a lot of political commentary, but he said, one of the best things you can do is, he was a big advocate for free speech because he wanted to understand why he believed the things he did and why people believe the things they think. And he was really good at, like, he would go and debate, like, because young earth creationism was like a super popular thing over in the US. It's like 40%, I think, of the US believe in some form of young earth creationism. So the earth's 6,000 years old, Noah's flood is literally real, that kind of stuff. And he would go off and debate sort of that, because he was an atheist, but also, like, I learned a lot more about evolutionary theory because I was listening to that stuff. Because there's some good YouTubers out there who do just, I'm going to dunk on creationism and I'm an evolutionary biologist.
Yeah. That's interesting because, I mean, I don't know. Well, you wouldn't know, actually, because you haven't listened to the other episodes.
I'm sorry.
No, but,
I didn't want to come in with any expectations.
Yeah,
so.
no, that's fine. No, but I'm a Christian myself.
Yeah.
So I believe, the world was created. I do also believe in evolution.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the majority of positions, right? My mum, who's a Rev Vicar, Holy Trinity, it's the accepted doctrine that, I say doctrine is a bit harsh, but it is. It's accepted that the rough basis is what the Earth was created, or the universe was set in motion, and then but then natural processes took over. That's the general thing, right? Whereas the young Earth creationists are they're typically the people who give religious people a bad name.
I would agree with that completely.
There are some
Not
sort of
there
are some very nice ethical people who are young earth creationists, but I'm talking specifically about in terms of dealing with knowledge. Partly because I care about what's true. Yeah. What and by true I mean what, before someone says any metaphysical stuff, what most comports with reality. So yeah, evolution I'm completely fine with. Obviously, I'm really interested. I mean, I don't have the brain for it, but I've got friends who've done things like quantum physics, and like some of the stuff that comes out of there is mental. Like when you say what, like, and you ask them a question,
it's all like interstellar type.
Well, so like they're really, really small. So
right.
And you ask them things like what happened before the Big Bang, and they look at you and go, that question makes no sense, because then you explain it. Then they explain it to you, and you go, "Oh my god, I'm stupid."
Yeah.
Not because they're being derogatory, but because you just don't know this stuff.
Yeah.
And you don't have I don't have the brain for them. I mean, I can do some fairly level advanced maths. I did maths as part of my degree, but like the maths they're talking about it's like crazy complicated. I'm like, oh my no, hide.
So you mentioned some evolutionary theory.
Yeah.
Just now, am I right in thinking there is a theory that has come out since Darwin's sort of mainly accepted theory that challenges that one? Is that right?
Not really. So creationism there's, especially in the US, they were very careful to couch it as it wasn't because of the First Amendment in the US, which it's very good on freedom of speech, but it also means you can't. So, like in a biology class, you cannot teach a religion as fact, and it's actually quite a good law. So it's to do with the Establishment Clause. So basically, officially speaking, the US government has no official position on religion. Officially speaking, right? We all know that's not true.
No,
but officially speaking, there is no position on religion. But it also means that you cannot have. So as well as protecting your freedom of speech. So it protects you as a Christian to go out and say, I believe in God, I believe in the resurrection of Jesus, I believe in the Virgin Mary's, the virgin birth, all that kind of stuff. That wasn't meant to be derogatory, by the way. I just in general, I don't want to go into.
Right.
Yeah. So I you believe in this set. So the government's not allowed to stop you from doing that. But at the same time, the government it prevents, or at least it should prevent, religions being taught in theory in federal buildings. So like if you have the Ten Commandments, you're not in theory supposed to have that in a courthouse in the US, a federal courthouse. Because it's implying an endorsement of a religion, and I know certain.
But they swear on the Bible.
Oh yeah, well I mean that came about in the 50s to separate them from the godless commies.
Yeah, the damn Reds.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's where that all came from, and the same with the what is it? In God We Trust on the dollar notes. That all came from the 50s with the Red Panic. But. Yeah, so they couched it in intelligent design was how they couched it. And they were very careful to not name what religion it was. And it was very clearly a young earth Christian creationism, because they were teaching Noah's flood and that kind of stuff, it's in the Christian Bible. And very famously, when they literally had to put it on trial because of how the American system works. Kind of like how... who was the guy who faked the Hitler's diaries over here? No, Holocaust denial. Someone who was public thing, and they had to go to. It literally went to trial. It was proven in court of law. So they did the same thing with creationism versus evolution, or intelligent design versus evolution. And at the time, a member of the American atheist group founded the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster as a. He wasn't necessarily to parody Christian faith. It was to parody the creationism argument, and he was saying that we need to teach all three. We need to teach the controversy, the gospel according to the flying spaghetti monster, intelligent design, and evolutionary theory that's true. And that's something I didn't really get into in the main part, is that parody is very good at dealing with authoritarians or people who want to impose a worldview. That's why I've always enjoyed things like The Thick of It. Great parody of Westminster, sort of like the Westminster bubble, like how the whip's office doesn't work. I didn't get into the office that much, but I did find it quite funny, like at points of it. Parks and Recreation is like an American satire on a city council. And even things like Mel Brooks, the producers, again, Springtime for House Painter as a song is pretty brutal until like it kicks into what the joke is. And because of the mockery in that song, it's like, okay, like Mel Brooks is the only person who get away with writing that. But he was like mocking the thing, and that's why I think you see it in authoritarian regimes. The first thing they crack down on is satire, like the Nazis try to prosecute somebody who said their dog looked like Hitler to mock Hitler.
Right. No. Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, the reason I asked is because I was chatting to a guy who is another atheist, and he studied sort of I can't remember what it was, biology or something like that. But he had a sort of a firm knowledge of evolution and that sort of thing. And I'm sure he mentioned something about some alternative atheist, like scientific theory about evolution.
So there are
that challenges the Darwinian.
So there's stuff that challenges out of Africa. So out of Africa we originate in Africa. I think it's Ethiopia-ish area of Africa. And there's an argument about, and I know Joe Rogan's gone on about it, although I don't listen to him that. I typically, I tried it out a while ago because I have too much else to listen to or do. But there's one about, were we like aquatic apes? That's the other theory. There's a lot wrong with it though, from what I've heard. There's a YouTuber, again, I believe she's like you. I believe that she's a theistic, evolutionary, theistic evolutionist. So she believes in God, but she is literally studied evolution for her. I think she's now a doctorate. I've been following her YouTube for a while, so obviously sort of following her career in academia at the same time. But she's gone into what the issues in the what's it, water ape theory.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of problems with it.
Right. Okay. So it's not sort of a newly widely accepted theory then.
No, it was something that was. Again, I'm not an expert, but it was proposed, and I think there are some huge problems with it.
Right.
It was. I listened to it like, you know what, that's interesting, and then I listened to a biologist, like this person, and she's like, no. And here's why: there's a lot of stuff that they were claiming that humans only do, but you find in other mammals that some other are genetic cousins, to use the family term.
Mm-hmm.
They do the same thing. Like if a gorilla gives birth in water, the thing will still hold its breath and get out and stuff like that. So, and we know gorillas involved nowhere near major water supply. Well, not major water supplies, but nothing like a sea.
Instinct is a funny thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, an intriguing thing.
Oh yeah, I'm. Yeah, it's very interesting. Like how, again, I haven't looked into it too much, but I always quite like how a good fiction writer can approach things like instinct, and like how somebody who is, you can mechanically put a body together, but then you don't understand the instincts that the body almost has its own thing it wants to do compared to the brain. I mean, like you walk past a chippy, and you know it's bad for you, and yet you go, oh, I'm really hungry, but you literally ate like 5 minutes ago. So it's really interesting. It's a really interesting thing to look into. I haven't looked into it as much, and it's definitely something that I would like to look into when I have some time.
I guess, yeah, that's it. Your analogy of the chippy there. I guess our body is probably telling our mind things, like it needs certain things. Like we might have just had a meal, but it might have been full of crap, and we need like a load of salt from the chips or something like that. Some potassium or
salt and
sodium.
But also, I think part of it as well with that, it's only the last few thousand years we've really had lots of food.
Yeah,
and not even that long. Maybe 500 years we've had plentiful supply, and it's only been the last 30 years where obesity's really been a problem. And I think a lot of it, is it type 2 error, cognitive error? It's where your brain is thinking about, is still working in like monkey and jungle mode,
right?
But we're not there, and you see this with moths, where they'll fly towards like beach moths, and they'll use the moon to go towards the sea or whatever, or get away from the sea. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but instead they'll see a lamp and they'll fly towards the lamp. Yeah. That's what they're doing. Yeah. They're trying to navigate via the light source they used to. The instinct have had before electricity existed. Yeah. But because of the electricity has so radically altered the world so quickly. I mean, the human race has been around for like 200,000 years. All the stuff we have now has really occurred in the last 250 years. Like what we would consider modern living. The pace of change has been crazy, and I'm talking on evolutionary timescales here, not. I woke up. I mean, so right, the Wright brothers first flew a plane in 1907. We got to the moon in 1969.
Mental, isn't it?
Yeah. So that gives you an idea of the pace of technology. When you want it to change, it can change crazy, and our instincts just haven't caught up with it.
No. Yeah, that's exactly it, isn't it?
But and I think I say that as somebody who is trying to lose some weight again because of being out of shape from injury and illness. I think that's part of the problem with a lot of food nowadays, is that we needed much higher calories, or they were much scarcer, so it was better to stuff your face now, even though you've just eaten, because you don't know when you're going to get food next. Whereas I can drive less than 10 miles and I can go past 6 shops or whatever, like depending on the route I take. If I do a route from here and round sort of the local major towns, I can stop every 10 miles, and I can go to a new chippy, and I can buy 4,000 calories worth of food and eat it. So I do think there is definitely a issue there. Not issue, but it's something to be aware of.
Yeah, we don't need what we think we need, basically.
No, although I do also agree with you partly that we do, like, sometimes the body does know what it needs. So I've in the past I've done a lot of cycling. I've done a couple of full 100-mile bike rides. I did one that was 115 because we got lost. So we had to look back on ourselves. And I say we could have turned around, but we decided to just do an extra loop because why not? We were feeling good. And like I got back to where we were riding, and I knew I ordered stuff, and I was like, it's not something I normally eat, but I was just like, I knew my body knew what it wanted. I didn't want sweet. I just needed salt. I needed some carbs.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Like,
so there is an element of trust there. But we need to be aware. I mean, I wouldn't want to say it's the Stoics was where sort of Marcus Aurelius would say, you're sort of a meat. I mean, I'm massively paraphrasing, but you're a meat sack controlled by a brain, and you need to understand. No, sorry, chimp paradox. I'm thinking of. So the chimp paradox. So the instincts of the chimp is bigger and stronger than your logical reasoning. So you need to learn how to like manage, almost judo throw your, like mentally judo your chimp into like behaving a little bit better. So, I really want this big bag of fish and chips, so I'm going to go on a bike ride, like a long bike ride first to earn it. Or, okay, you want fish and chips, but we'll make healthier fish and chips. We won't have them. You won't deep fry everything. We'll have a nice piece of lean fish, and we'll have some freshly cut potatoes or something. So there's ways of dealing with that kind of stuff.
That takes a level of being sort of in tune with both
absolutely
what your body is telling you what you need, but also having that I don't want to say maturity, but that awareness of how to obtain it in a way that isn't going to be.
Yeah, and I mean also sometimes it's not just that, but so I've used the chimp paradox ideas when I've competed for sport. Like I used to have real bad the yips is probably the best way. Like I get into my own head and I'd be like panic and I'd freeze, and like things I could do
I've not met someone who's actually experienced the yips. Right, okay.
Well, so I mean, it's called target panic when you're shooting, but it's the same idea where you sort of freeze up and you're not, you can't do your process. And part of that, the part way of getting through that is just training, just process. But I found managing the chimp which is the phrase, is a really good way of doing it as well. Because so like if I'm off competing, like I don't manage my diet at all. I eat whatever I want because that's my because. That way, my brain. I mean, I have bacon most days of the week.
Really?
I don't have. I don't. My breakfasts are usually cooked.
Yeah.
Because if I'm working from home, I can just cook it. Checking my emails, doing what.
You're making me annoyed. That I used to be like that before kids came along, and then suddenly that was a pain in the ass.
Yeah. So I can do that, but then which is quite nice.
Yeah.
But I'll just stuff my face when I'm competing, partly because they're very long days. And there's a lot of walking and everything else, and then it keeps that. I've learned that through practice. That's how I keep my chimp happy, so I can get on with my competition.
Yeah. Right. That's cool. Well, it's getting to that point. It's 9:30. And we're probably cracking into the 2 hour mark nearly.
Yeah.
For the total thing. So thanks for coming onto the
That's
podcast.
All right. Well,
man.
Thanks for having me. I know it was I know you said I admittedly haven't seen anything, but I know you said you've had like local stuff doing very local things, whereas I'm talking about this big international mess.
I think that's really cool though. What you're doing.
So it's nice to have to be invited on. So it's the first time I've done this. I know there are other people who've done other podcasts. But it's nice to be on here to actually say my piece. And I mean, obviously you've asked questions and pushed back, but you've also let me talk. And that's something I find that's quite difficult, is that you start talking and then people interrupt to ask you a question that you're trying to get to anyway.
Yeah. I mean, the reason why I don't interrupt is because I find it so annoying when people interrupt me.
Yeah.
So yeah, you're welcome.
I mean, you can. I'd say you interrupt to ask a clarifier, which is quite useful because I'm aware that I'm not the normal. I say normal people, but people who aren't into it, who don't know the ins and outs and the whys and the wherefores. like, I mean, I could chuck out a reference to the Budapest Memorandum, and I was like, yeah, I'll get to it. Don't worry. So that's quite a useful thing to do. So that's quite a good way of having it, and hopefully it'll do decent traffic and it'll act as a
Well, I mean, as you say, this is a big thing.
Yeah.
It's like, it's a global
yeah.
issue. So you're giving me some reach.
Hopefully, yeah. I mean, I have like, obviously I put it on Facebook once it comes out. I've even told the UK crowd, the UK NAFO crowd, that I'm doing this, and obviously so that I could, partly so that they could give me things to jog my memory to talk about.
Yeah, brilliant.
But I have also said that hopefully it's going to be more of a explain this to normal people type thing, and so you can use it, so you might get more traffic.
Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of the premise of the whole podcast is, just for the people who are doing cool stuff to explain what they're doing to people who have no clue what it is that's going on, because, as I say, there are so many untold stories going on, such as yours.
Yeah, and I say I'm definitely going to have to catch up on the previous episodes, because I'm sure I've missed some good stuff.
Yeah, well, Dan, the violinist, he was very entertaining chap to have on. He was talking, obviously, primarily about a concert that's now been and gone, but still entertaining. The other chaps we've had on, absolutely recommend them. Have a listen. Joe Botting and his Geopark. Yeah. Craziness. Jimmy with his basketball. You're starting the Llandrindod Lakers. It's informative. It's entertaining. What more do you want? So. Yeah,
and I mean, I think especially the format's quite good. If it's just we're going to talk about local stuff, because people don't know what's going on, but also people like me, I'm just like a sponge. I just want to know what, like, without getting into like being a gossip. But I am curious about stuff, so it's always useful to have resources like this.
Great. Well, glad you approve. And thanks for coming on.
Okay.
And my camera's died, so I'm going to steal the one which is on you and say thanks for watching, everyone. And I should probably say something along the lines of like, subscribe, follow, share, all that good stuff. So please do that.
Can I get, sorry.
Is this really zoomed in on my face?
It is, yeah.
Oh,
sorry.
Dear.
One thing I was meaning to say the whole time, which I forgot to say in the main cast, is Slava Ukraini.
Say again.
It's the one thing I forgot to say, perhaps you can tack it onto the end.
Yeah.
The main one is Slava Ukraini.
Okay, there we are. He said it. He's done it. So, as I say, like, subscribe, share, follow, all that good stuff, please. Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Bye.